In tonight's video, we're talking about the latest trade talk around the league. Tonight, we're focusing on the Edmonton Oilers, Vancouver Canucks, and the Ottawa Senators. We also have another longtime NHL veteran announcing his retirement, several roster cuts, and some key prospects sent down to the minor leagues, some injury updates, and more from around the NHL. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here in today's video, a variety of news and some trade talk here. Let's start off with the announcement of Jerard Stepan, longtime NHL veteran, has announced his retirement. Stepan played for a handful of teams, including the New York Rangers, where he probably had the most success during his career. Also went down to the Coyotes, played for the Senators, the Hurricanes, and really had a good amount of NHL success. He spent 13 seasons, 890 games played, over 120 playoff games, and this was a real solid veteran player. The last couple of years finished up with the Carolina Hurricanes. Wasn't in Arizona or Ottawa too long. Like I said, it had the biggest amount of his success with the New York Rangers. They had a good number of runs there where they were a solid playoff team for a number of consistent years. Unfortunately, could never get over the hump and win the Stanley Cup, but they did have a lot of good teams there when he was there and was a part of it. So we'd like to wish Jerard Stepan the best in his retirement and whatever comes next for him, which is actually rumored to be maybe working for the Minnesota Wild. It's not been confirmed as of yet, but I know some of the Minnesota media said that there's some speculation that the Wild and Billy Guerin might be hiring Jerard Stepan, and actually one of his former teammates as well, Carl Hagelin, who also recently retired. There's some speculation that they may be taking on roles with the Wild. I don't think it would be anything full-time or permanent. It sounds like it might be more of a part-time gig for them. But either way, the fact that they're staying involved in the game, working with an NHL franchise, is certainly still good news. So best of luck to Stepan in the next adventure if it is indeed working in Minnesota. Now, we also got a bunch of roster cuts. Obviously, teams are starting to trim down their rosters here as we get later into training camp, and we are at a point where we're certain, obviously, the last number of days, a lot of waiver activity, but a lot of other key prospects as well have also been demoted that are not requiring waivers. So, for example, there's some other prospects that you might have been hoping to see in the NHL, but it will be starting in the minors for sure. That includes Montreal Canadiens defenseman Logan Mailloux. Of course, I know he kind of was drafted with some controversy, but Montreal certainly keen on giving him an opportunity, and he has been cleared by the NHL for that. Obviously, the Habs decided though that he's not quite ready for NHL activity, and he's going to be sent and start the season with Laval in the AHL. So we'll see how Mailloux makes out down there. Boston Bruins again, Fabian Lysell. He's a former first-round pick from a couple years back now. Lysell still not able to crack this Bruins roster. I wonder what the future holds for Lysell in Boston, to be completely honest, given the fact that this is one of the lesser experienced Bruins rosters we've seen. Obviously, they lost some key players with Bergeron and Krejci. I know Lysell's not necessarily going to step in and be a top six center for them, but I really thought it might be a year where he gets a better chance. But I know for one prospect that is getting a long look in Boston, it might even start the season there, is youngster Matthew Poitras. Now, Poitras is probably at this point has a great chance, by the looks of it, to be a top six center. And he projects to have a shot at that long term. I just don't think very many people, myself included, saw that happening this year. But to be honest, going into the season with Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha as your top two centers, if this young kid can step in and give you a good offensive role, it's great. I mean, Brad Marchand paid him an ultimate compliment the other day when he was asked about him and what he thought. And he said he reminds him of how he plays, of sort of like a Mitch Marner type of player. So, I mean, Marner's had a lot of success, very creative and good with the puck. So that's some great compliments there. So ultimately, we'll see if he sticks, but for Lysell, disappointing to not make it here again. The Jets have sent down Brad Lambert. That one's not as surprising. Hopefully he will get a good look here at the NHL at some point. I know the Jets do obviously have some other young players that are certainly playing ahead of them. obviously Perfetti and Lucius, etc. So we'll see what Lambert can do. I think a full year in the AHL wouldn't hurt him, though. He certainly spent part of last year in junior, which was good for him too. The Edmonton Oilers and Xavier Bourgault. Bourgault's going to be sent down to the American Hockey League too. I'm not sure what the Oilers are going to end up doing. It sounds like they might keep Dylan Holloway. I'm not sure about Raphael Lavoie. I think there's a chance Lavoie might be the 13th forward, but Bourgault will start in the American Hockey League. But I do think he had a good camp from what I've seen, and I think that the training camp showing will at least get him some call-up options later into the season. So we'll see. Now, as I mentioned, we've had some busy waiver wire. In case you missed it earlier, I do have a video out with today's waiver news. It was kind of dominated by the Sens. Obviously, the Senators, after last night's game in Halifax against Sidney Crosby and the Penguins, made a bunch of roster cuts. They don't play again until Thursday against the Jets. They're spending, I think, today and tomorrow doing some team bonding stuff. I think they were doing a little golf resort type of trip. But they had to put JBD, Jacob Bernard-Docker, and Igor Sokolov. To get them down to the minors, they need waivers now. So they had to go on waivers, along with Matthew Highmore and Jacob Larson. Highmore and Larson were not surprises. They were destined and signed to be American Hockey League players. And, obviously they have a little bit of experience, so they can be call-up options. Sokolov was a player I think a lot of Sens fans are hoping would get a longer look, but the problem, like I said, is not that he hasn't improved. He has. He had a great summer. He came into camp probably in the best shape of his life. Worked hard over the summer on his skating. He spent a ton of time with the skating coach. He didn't have any trips home. He stayed in Ottawa and worked on that. And, I think for the most part, he had a really good showing. But the problem is I don't think they really want to see Sokolov as a fourth liner. He needs to play higher in the lineup to get more of an offensive role. And that's the only reason why he's getting cut. So I think Sokolov will be one of the main call-up options, if not the main one from an offensive perspective, if they need a top 9 winger. But for right now, he's going to be going on waivers if he clears, of course. If he gets picked up, then he'll be off the roster. But either way, the Sens are going to save some cap space here, which we're going to discuss that here a little bit later as well. So we'll see what happens. I know the Sens have been getting a lot of flack from their fans and others about their asset management, losing Lassie Thompson, possibly losing Jacob Bernard-Docker, a couple of first-round picks. But, at the end of the day, if these guys haven't materialized, if you want to give them some flack, give it for the draft selections. There might have been another player there that maybe should have been picked instead, but they've put a lot of time and effort into these players and their development. If they haven't been good enough to crack the roster, then so be it. This is part of the process. Doesn't matter when they were drafted. And at the end of the day, the Sens' top 4 defense is well set with Thomas Chabot, Jacob Chychrun, Jake Sanderson, and Artem Zhu. There's not a lot of space there. And they got Eric Brandstrom and Travis Hamonic. I know a lot of people aren't necessarily fond of the Hamonic extension, and take that out of the equation all you want. There's still Tyler Clevin, who's also playing ahead of them. So, I'm not really sure that this was going to, not go another way regardless. They just haven't had a good enough showing to get opening night selection to be on the roster. So I don't understand the backlash here. I don't think this is bad asset management. This is just an unfortunate circumstance of the prospects not developing. And if you want to talk asset management, maybe those picks could have been put to better use at the time. But Thompson was drafted 4 years ago. Bernard-Docker is 5. It's been a long time now. So it's, one of those things. Now, Bernard-Docker has a 2-year contract with one-way money, over $800K. I have a feeling he's going to clear and stay with the Sens, but we'll find out tomorrow afternoon. A couple of other updates as well. Jake Guentzel, the Penguins, obviously had ankle surgery later in the summer after trying to rehab an issue and it wasn't working out. He right now is projected to miss the first 5 games of the season or so. But good news for the Penguins is that we're not even into camp yet, and he is skating in a like a regular jersey. He was able to shed the non-contact jersey. So that's good news for Pittsburgh. I still don't think he's going to get into any preseason games. I don't think he's really going to be rushed ahead of schedule, but I know they certainly are hoping for a much better season this year. Made some big moves. They get new management, and they want to get into the playoffs, and Guentzel can be a big part of that. So as soon as they get him in the lineup, the better, but things are progressing well at the very least, so that's good news there. Trevor Zegras made his first appearance at Ducks training camp today after getting his contract settled as well, so obviously he has some catching up to do, but the end of the day, he should be good to go for opening night. I know his Ducks fans and Ducks teammates were very happy to see him, and certainly nice for him to get back in the mix. Now, on the trade front, like I said, there's 3 teams we want to focus on, all Canadian teams here today. I want to start with Vancouver. Some talk between Rick Dhaliwal and Don Taylor on the Donnie and Daly show. Dhaliwal is pretty well connected with the Canucks, and he thinks there's a good chance that young defenseman Jack Rathbone is going to be on the move here soon. I know Rathbone's the player that was been drafted and developed by the Canucks. There's been times when I know what they were saying, and I kind of agree with them here, that there was times when he looked like he was ready, and I was a little confused why he didn't get more of a chance. And I know they were saying with Bruce Boudreau when he was the head coach there, that because he's a smaller defenseman that's mostly known for his offensive abilities, they didn't want to have Rathbone and Hughes in the lineup because they wanted a different dynamic and some more size in other areas. Certainly Rathbone wasn't going to be expected to outplay Hughes and take his spot. That's not what anybody's expecting by any means. So because of the fact that Quinn Hughes is their power play guy and the offensive leader back there, and because he's a smaller stature, they just didn't want to have too many defenseman with the same style and size, which is unfortunate for him. I mean, I do kind of understand because, you need a variety of actor. You do need a little bit of beef and some size. And, at the end of the day, you can't have too many defensemen that are all built the same. But at the same time, there is 6D back there. You could have 2 defensemen that might be great puck rushers, great offensive. You still have lots of other options to add some size and strength to level things out. But the Canucks never seem to really want to go there, and after this year only getting into very limited preseason action, I think he only got into 1 game and then was put on waivers. He did clear, but this is a guy that's very talented offensively. Went to Harvard, so he's a smart guy. Got a good education. Went to college, so he came to the NHL with a good foundation, and I think if he can get to the right team, he should likely be able to go and make a run of it here in the NHL. So even though he's cleared waivers, Dhaliwal was saying that he has not asked for a trade. He will report to Abbotsford for the American Hockey League team, but he's frustrated and wants an opportunity, and he doesn't know how long he's going to want to stay in Abbotsford before he will request a trade, I guess is what it's expected, if they don't move him pretty quickly here into the year. So hopefully the Canucks do right by him and give him a chance to go somewhere else and get a fresh start and get a chance to play in the NHL so he can show if he's capable of it. In Edmonton, there was an Athletic article, Alan Mitchell talking about some kind of just predicting the season, looking ahead for the Oilers, just kind of some what ifs, not necessarily a rumor on something he says that it's like he has sources saying it's going to happen or anything like that, but more of a speculation on what they might do. And he wonders, depending on how they start, if they might, regardless, even if they maybe do a goalie upgrade. Now right now Jack Campbell's had a good preseason. They're optimistic that he'll bounce back this year and give them some more solid goaltending than he did last year. Obviously, they like Stuart Skinner, but obviously last year he showed that he needs some help, and he's still young. So at the end of the day, they're not going to move both goaltenders. I mean, that would be silly. But if Campbell, is somebody they're don't have their full trust in, would they consider talking to Winnipeg about Connor Hellebuyck? Now, that would be tricky. Now, Edmonton would have some assets to intrigue Winnipeg, I have no doubt. I think they would have to move a goalie, though. I don't know that Winnipeg would necessarily want Campbell. I mean, unless the Oilers can get Campbell playing well enough that they feel comfortable taking him on. And it could be a case where the Oilers might try to sell high on Campbell if he's playing well, and get a guy like Hellebuyck who's more experienced. I mean, obviously they'd have to extend him to make it worth their while. Would Winnipeg take on that contract? He'd still have 3 more years after this one at $5 million. I mean, if Hellebuyck's not going to stay, and which we don't know that for sure, but if things are looking that way, would they take Campbell because he's got term and if he's playing well, that they would have better confidence in him? And they have Brassois right now too. Would a Brassois-Campbell tandem work in Winnipeg and get Hellebuyck to Edmonton? I don't know. It's an intriguing idea. But like I said, it's not necessarily something he said was going to happen or that they've been talking about. It's just some speculation if they might go for an upgrade in goal. Because at the end of the day, if you look at this roster, they are well stacked in the forward group. They have some of the best players in the league. Even their blue line is not phenomenal, but it's pretty good. And really at this point, they have enough strength back there that if they had a higher level consistent goaltending, that might be the difference between them winning a Stanley Cup and not. And, going for a guy like Hellebuyck would be challenging. They'd obviously have to put some assets in there. I can imagine Philip Broberg for sure. Maybe Dylan Holloway. We're looking at some picks. Like, they have some players there. Look at some prospects that are not in the league yet, like Xavier Bourgault, who they just demoted. You just put together a package of like Broberg, Holloway, Bourgault, first rounders. Like, I'm not saying it's going to take all of that, but like they have some pieces there that Winnipeg might go, maybe this is interesting. Maybe we should consider this. And of course, they'd have to take a goaltender back as well. I would suspect it would have to be Campbell, not Skinner. But, just a crazy idea. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but an interesting thing to think about. Should the Oilers sell high on Campbell, even if he does start strong? Because would you have your confidence in him? He has been a yo-yo his entire career. He's been up and down. So if you get him playing well, do you sell high? That's the big question. And in Ottawa, like I said earlier, you get some waivers activity going on here with JBD and Sokolov. They both clear. That's going to free up another one. I think it gets them to about $1.7 million in cap space. The problem is, though, it's a shortened roster. So getting them down into either off the roster completely if they're picked up or into the American Hockey League if they're demoted, if they clear, no matter what happens there, they free up space. That gets them a lot closer to having money to sign Shane Pinto. So I wondered if they might go the next step and maybe put another player on waivers in the next couple of days and do that to free up the space for Pinto. The problem is, though, is it's going to leave them at least one or two forwards short to start the campaign. And the NHL is not going to let them do emergency recalls because they're short on cap space, at least not to start the year. They'd have to be shorthanded for a while. So I don't know that they're really going to be able to make that work. I mean, it might get them to sign Shane Pinto, but before they only have a number of days left to still free up some money. I still think Matty Joseph is a guy that's going to have to go to free that money up. Otherwise you're moving too many other bodies and you're going to be shorthanded. At this rate, I don't know if they can move a defenseman because they've already lost Thompson on waivers. If they demote JBD or they trade him or if he clears, like no matter what happens, if he's not on the roster, then whatever. But they have their other 6 defensemen. They've already lost some of that depth now. I don't know that they can trade. Trading from that back end is not as logical as it was a few days ago. So it's difficult to say, but if they might be able to use waivers just to free up enough money. And the same thing with Joseph. Joseph could be the guy that goes on waivers now because if he doesn't get picked up, and I suspect he wouldn't, they can get like a $1.1 million relief from that. So they get Joseph relief, and then of course the other money that's already been cleared from JBD and Sokolov. Maybe they'd have to be creative. I don't know if they could figure out a way to get Pinto signed and bring up at least one more forward. It's still going to be awfully difficult to have 12 forwards and 6 defensemen and 2 goalies. I mean, Josh Norris is the big X factor in all this as well because there's still some concerns over his health. If he's for some reason not healthy to start the campaign, then that could be a solution. But again, the only solution there is if he goes in LTIR and then he's going to miss the first month of the season. And not going to do that if he doesn't need to be out that long. So it's complicated for sure. But I wonder if these waiver activities is obviously part of the problem here is because they weren't strong enough to make the roster. But I do wonder if it's also part of the plan to maybe make some room for getting the Pinto contract freed up and signed. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.